Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I'm Pınar and I'm with for the second time, which I feel very lucky for, with Matt Bishop. Hi, Matt. How are you? How is everything going for you?
I'm very well, thank you. Just been through the Formula One summer shutdown, which is well needed and perhaps even well deserved, but certainly well needed rest. And just about obviously to go off to Spa-Francorchamps and then Zandvoort and then Monza for 3 races in as many weekends. So yeah, busy times.
Yes, then I'm gonna start with the calendar first, asking about the calendar. It's the most crowded calendar of the Formula One history, and probably it will be more crowded next season. How are you feeling about it personally, and how you handle it in team? How you manage with all the races, all the traveling and everything?
Yeah, I think next year will be perhaps even 24 races. This year was 22. It was going to be 23, as you know, but then the Russian Grand Prix was cancelled for obvious reasons, and very correctly so. But yeah, this is the busiest race season so far, and next year may be more busy. How do I cope with it personally? Well, you know, I'm not a young man anymore. I'm 59. I will be 60 in time for next year's season. I turn 60 at Christmas. So yeah, I mean, it's not as easy as it used to be, particularly as there used to be far fewer races. But I think one of the things that we're seeing now is that apart from the people who have to attend every race, and obviously the drivers first and foremost have to attend every race, but then they get some rest periods in between. And many of them travel in a rather easy way, perhaps not all of them, but perhaps some of them on private jets and so on, and helicopters and so on. Not Sebastian Vettel, of course. He doesn't like helicopters. He's very aware of his carbon footprint in that area. Although, of course, you can't do much about it if you race in every race. You will have to get on aeroplanes, and he does. Anyway, yes, so I think those who can miss some races nowadays do, and people in my position, anyone in a senior comms role, marketing, and in general, senior management, you know, they begin to miss some races. Even some mechanics are beginning to miss some races and work on a rotation basis. Not really happened to our team yet, but it may begin to happen. We don't know. I remember when it began to happen in NASCAR, and now it is completely de rigueur. Nobody would do a 39 race season necessarily, doing every single race, drivers apart. And I think that's the right way. We have to wean ourselves off this fetishistic adherence to having to do every single race. And what we actually have to do is run our departments. And in order to run your department, you have to blend time at the circuits with time at the factory and in the offices. And that's certainly what I do. And it's how I'm able to continue to operate at my ripe old age, despite such a busy schedule. I also have 3 brilliant deputies, by the way, and I'll take the trouble to name them. Will Hings, Steve Cooper, and Eve Merrill. Brilliant people who make my life incredibly much easier and make me look a lot better than I would otherwise, because they are actually the brains of my operation, not me.
Yeah, but yeah, I have to say you're still looking very good and not old or anything, but and I think rotation will be the key for the next seasons if it's getting crowded. And my next question is about how is everything going for Aston Martin after returning to sports last season, and how was this season? What were your expectations and how is it so far?
Well, I won't deny that we didn't start this season quite as well as we'd hoped. Obviously, last season was kind of disappointing. We finished 7th in the Constructors' Championship. We had 2 podiums. I know we only kept 1 podium because in Hungary there was a problem after the race. with the fuel volumes. But nonetheless, we finished twice on the podium on the road, and I think that showed that we had some vestigial pace. It wasn't still a good enough season, and we're all racers here, and we were disappointed. So we hoped that we would have a better season this season, and so far we haven't. It was a completely new formula, completely new, as we all know, totally different aero, totally different tyres, and some teams did a better job than others. Even mighty Mercedes did not do a particularly good job straight away. They have worked hard and impressively, I would say, to begin to claw back some pace, but they still haven't won a Grand Prix. And if you told me at the beginning of the season that we would go into the Belgian Grand Prix without Lewis Hamilton or even George Russell, but even particularly Lewis Hamilton as a 7-time world champion, perhaps 8-time, some people say. Anyway, not having won a race, you'd be astonished. I would have been astonished, but so it is. And they like us, found the new regulations a little bit difficult to get to grips with, literally. And I think the thing is that, you know, in all our simulations, we saw that our car was quite quick. It had downforce, but the whole problem of porpoising, which is a word I remember very well from 40 years ago when I was a fan, and I used to read about it in the pages of Autosport and so on, when that was a magazine more notably than obviously a website, long before the web was invented. And cars such as Lotus and Arrow's early ground effect cars from the early 80s complained, or their designers and drivers complained of porpoising, and that phrase was invented. Bouncing, really, you could call it, but porpoising is the Formula One cognoscenti word of choice. Anyway, 40 years later, we're now suffering from it, and we had to leave a number of, quite a bit of our downforce on the table. We weren't able to utilize it, simply because if we had done, the vibrations would have been too difficult for the car simply even to hold together, or the drivers to cope. And we've seen all that. But now we're all working to try to cope with the porpoising problems, and I think we're all succeeding to a different degree. And I'm hoping that in this second leg of the season, after the summer shutdown, that we will begin to score points on a slightly more regular basis than perhaps we did. So that's what I would say about this season. I'm sure you're going to ask me about next season, so I won't talk about that until you ask me about it.
I hope Aston Martin will get a podium for the second round of the season. But of course, I will first ask, Sebastian Vettel is retiring from the sports, which was a kind of devastating news for most of the fans, most of the spectators. Sport is, I think, losing someone's very special, very different and very vocal. And also Alonso is coming along with Aston Martin. So one champion is going, another one is coming to the team, and you work with both. How do you feel about this change? And how do you feel about Sebastian leaving F1?
So I'll start answering your question by talking about Sebastian. You know, I have loved working with Sebastian this year and last year, and I fully intend to continue to enjoy working with him for the remainder of this year. Let's just say some things about Sebastian. So he is one of the greatest drivers in the history of our sport. Sometimes I think that's overlooked for a number of reasons. One, perhaps because, for whatever reason, because we, and indeed to a lesser extent, but still to an appreciable extent, Ferrari before us, were not really able to provide him with a fully championship-winning car. Obviously, he won races with Ferrari, and he hasn't yet won races with us. But nonetheless, they were disappointed as well, and he wasn't able to repeat his championship-winning form with Ferrari. And of course, he did win 4 world championships in a row with Red Bull. And I think sometimes that achievement on his part was underestimated, because people assumed that much of it was down to the competitiveness of the car. And by the way, many great drivers have been criticized or let's say the excellence of their achievements have been criticized on the basis that people say it's only the car. That was said about Sebastian Vettel in his glory years at Red Bull. It was said before then about Michael Schumacher in his glory years at Ferrari. And of course, more recently, it's been said consistently and continually by critics of Lewis Hamilton during his glory years at Mercedes. And I always think it's unfair. By the way, since the sport was invented, the great drivers have generally found their way into great teams. Not surprising, is it? Not very surprising. Let's go back to Fangio, Juan Manuel Fangio, who in the 1950s won 5 world championships for 4 different teams. How did he do that? Because he always made sure that the team that had the best car hired him, and he joined that team. And one of his teammates famously said, "How come you always get the best car, Juan Manuel? That isn't fair. Why do you always get the best car?" And he looked at him and said, "Would you expect to get the best car? Would you expect me to get the worst car?" And actually, of course, he was the best driver, so he got the best car. And that is how it works. And it's how it always has worked, and it probably always will work. So that's the first thing. Sebastian is uber successful. He's won 4 world championships, and he's 3rd in the list of Formula One Grand Prix winners at 53. Obviously, Lewis, the only driver who's gone past 100. Michael, the only one other than Lewis who's gone past 90. But Sebastian in 3rd place on 53. Ahead of Prost, ahead of Senna. So look, credit where it's due. A great driver, someone who will go down in history as a great driver, and also a great man. And I think we've seen that more recently. And I would say, if I may, that we have probably worked harder, we at Aston Martin have probably worked harder with him to give him opportunities to show what a great man he is outside of the cockpit than perhaps Ferrari and Red Bull did beforehand. And I'm not criticizing those teams. I'm just saying we've worked very hard at it. So whether or not it's Sebastian talking about the environment and why he thinks it's so important, and saving bees, or picking up litter, or doing all the other things that he does in order to try to show what's important and try to alter people's behavior in order to prioritize what's important. Or indeed the wonderful things he does when he visits schools in underprivileged regions of different countries, anywhere from the United Kingdom to Saudi Arabia, where he's visited schools and helped underprivileged people, and the United States of America for that matter as well. Not only schools, but prisons for young people. Feltham Young Offenders Institute, which is for boys between the age of 15 and 21. And there he went earlier this summer to go and inspire them to say, when you have done your time, when you have finished your sentence, you can make your life a success again. And he explained why and showed how. And also he's been on political programs like BBC Question Time and answered questions alongside politicians, sometimes better than the politicians answered them themselves. So I think he's not only a great driver, but also a great man. And I'm very proud to have worked with him. And I'm looking forward to the next few months when I will continue to work with him. Will I miss him? Yes, as a man and as a colleague, yes, I will. But I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Fernando Alonso. Obviously, I've worked with Fernando Alonso before at McLaren, not while McLaren was at its winning best, because I wasn't there in 2007, which was a difficult year for McLaren, but was a winning year. Don't forget, 8 Grand Prix were won by Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso in 2007. But I joined on the 1st of January 2008, McLaren, in the wake of what was called Spygate, the Annus Horribilis, the difficult year. And of course, Fernando had left by that time under a cloud, but that's ancient history. Then he came back and did a number of years for McLaren when McLaren was powered by Honda, before Honda had found the winning way that they found again and have found and retain now with Red Bull. And those weren't great years, but Fernando was actually a pleasure to work with and always quick. Ask Stoffel van Dorn, ask Jensen Button. They will tell you how quick Fernando Alonso was and is. And by the way, at 41, I think he's as fit as a butcher's dog, as we say in the UK in English. He is as hungry as ever. He is as quick as ever. We have offered him a multi-year contract. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but multi-year means more than one, doesn't it? And that was important to him because he doesn't want to do just 1 year. He wants to do more years. I don't know how many years he will end up doing, but I think he will do it as long as he is fit and as long as he is fast. And I think he will be fit and fast for quite a few years yet. He is a remarkable driver. Brilliant racecraft, wonderful race pace, canny, clever, strategic, hungry. His appetitive desire to win rubs up on you. You want to work with him to help achieve that. I think that we have now a brilliant blend of youthful speed, Lance Stroll, and experienced speed, Fernando Alonso. And I think that we've always talked about our 5-year plan. This is year 2 only of our 5-year plan. And our aim at the end of our 5-year plan, we're not predicting that we're going to be world champions at the end of those 5 years, but we are saying that we will be fully competitive. And I think that both Lance and Fernando will be part of that story as we climb the rankings towards that ambition. I couldn't be happier. Fernando, great, great, great driver, exciting arrival. Everyone in this building that I'm speaking in now, which is the Aston Martin factory at Silverstone, there was an absolute buzz when we announced it, and I can't wait to work with him. But in the meantime, it's going to be great to work with Seb again till the end of the year.
Yes, definitely. And I can't wait to watch Fernando in greens next season. I'm very excited what's gonna come with him. But before going to that, I want to go back to Sebastian Vettel part again, if you may. It's what he did in the sport in the last few years. I think it was inside of him from the beginning, but he turned out and he put out something different with Lewis Hamilton, like not together, but two of them were very vocal about changing of the sport and how we perceive the worldly issues in Formula One, not just racing, but human rights, environmental rights, and everything goes along with it. And Aston Martin was very allowed to do everything that Sebastian was vocal for, never step back and always supported from an outside view. How this is gonna affect the team, like, because there will be someone missing who is talking very vocally and very famous person. How this will change in Aston Martin, and how will you facing these issues next season without a face like Sebastian Vettel?
I think everybody at Aston Martin embraces what we call "we race as one," hashtag "we race as one," which is, by the way, invented by Formula One itself. But we have been active and enthusiastic supporters and proponents of it. I think there's another thing now Formula One has recently invented, another hashtag, which is hashtag drive it out. And that is, we want to see the end of abusive behavior, which we saw, for instance, in the grandstands and so on in Austria. And we've also seen online, particularly on Twitter, but not only on Twitter, but online as well. And we need to drive that out. And I'm not blaming any particular group of fans. I'm just saying we're seeing more of it than perhaps we used to, and that's a great pity. So we need to work together, all of us, understanding that there may be fault on all sides, and that if we club together and work together in a collaborative way, that we all improve everything we do in the sport and offer opportunities for fans who feel that they are being troubled, either online or in person at a racetrack, that they have a place to go, that they have protections that they can see. So all of those things I think we're working hard on. And Aston Martin is at the forefront of that, as it is, as I say, at the forefront of We Racers One. Now, what does We Racers One really mean? Well, it means that anyone can be, should be, must be, and should be welcomed to be a part of Formula One, whether that is a driver, whether that is an engineer, whether that is a mechanic, whether that is a comms, PR, marketing or media person, whether that is a journalist or a photographer, or anyone else who works in Formula One, or motorsport for that matter, they should feel welcome. And that also, of course, includes fans, because sometimes I think fans have felt less welcomed, perhaps if they don't match or fit the stereotypical demographic, which traditionally, let's be honest about it, motorsport, particularly in Europe and the West, has been the province, really, of white heterosexual males. Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Obviously, I'm a gay man. I'm a white male, but I'm a gay man. And I'm part of one of the founding ambassadors of Racing Pride, which seeks to further and promote the interests of LGBTQ plus people in motorsport globally. And I'm very proud of that. And you asked how Aston Martin would continue to do this kind of work in the absence of Sebastian Vettel going forward. Well, my answer is that it isn't only Sebastian Vettel. Yes, he is the most famous adherent and proponent of all the things I've just been talking about, but he's not the only one. It goes very deep into this factory. Everyone here shares those ideals and values. And indeed, we were the first team that formally partnered with Racing Pride, and we remain formally partnered with Racing Pride. And that's not just a hashtag, and that's not just logos on the car. That's also Racing Pride comes into this factory and does lectures, workshops, symposia, and so on, showing people here how to behave, or helping them with how to behave. And by the way, if anyone's watching this and is wondering about recent scandals that have existed, not actually among our employees, but among some of the employees or actually contracted workers of some of our suppliers, well, what actually happened? What actually happened is that they lost their jobs immediately, and rightly so, as soon as it was found out about. And that's because we have a zero tolerance policy, and we make sure and extend that zero tolerance policy to our suppliers and anyone who works for our suppliers, even if they're only short-term contracted workers. I thought I'd just say that because you never know, people sometimes jump to the negative conclusions, and I thought I would make that point because actually everything we have done, I believe, is completely compliant with our zero tolerance policy around abuse and bullying and discrimination of any kind, and also is totally in tune with our heartfelt and enthusiastic adherence to We Racers One. So we'll miss Seb because he's a special person, but we've got Fernando, who's a special person in a different way. But all the other 750 of us are enthusiastic adherents to it, and we all speak from the same hymn sheet. And speaking as a gay man, walking around this building and meeting everybody, I'm welcomed, I feel accepted and even cherished.
Thank you for clarification. By the way, Matt, you didn't have to, but you still. Thank you for that. About the thing that happened with your contractor, actually. I'm getting my tears a little bit wet because all this going on is a little bit was tough this season. I've seen people online getting bullied in real life in Austrian Grand Prix, and you welcome them. And I think it was very special, and I think it's very needed because I'm a girl, I'm a woman actually now that started watching Formula One since I was 12, and I never felt, I felt very safe in Formula One every time I go to Turkish Grand Prix or other Grand Prix. So I felt very sad for the people who have to struggle in that race, because that's not how you should feel to go to your favorite sports. You should feel safe, you should feel like a home. So thanks for being out loud for that as a team and as a person.
Thank you. I'll just add to that. I know what you're referring to, of course. And to be fair, there are a number of people, quite a large number of people actually, who had unpleasant experiences at that race. And we got to hear about some of them. And it was actually Formula One, the organization Formula One, who offered paddock passes to the two girls, the two young women who came to our hospitality, paddock hospitality, that they were invited and offered passes by Formula One, which was very generous and I think the right decision from Formula One. But then we said, well, if they've been invited by Formula One, then we're very happy to give them paddock hospitality and show them around the garage, because they'd had a very difficult Friday and Saturday. And so why not give them a very nice Sunday? And by the way, again, I'm going to say it because, you know, Formula One Twitter particularly has become a bit toxic in places, which is a great pity. And we need to try to stand out against and try to encourage people to be nicer to each other on social media, and particularly Twitter. And, you know, I'm a prolific tweeter and I love tweeting and I love Twitter, and I do my hashtag on this day tweets every single morning, get up early in the morning to do it because I love the history so much. And I still get sometimes abused and homophobically abused and so on, and I have to put up with it because the alternative is just to delete my account and forget about it. But I think perhaps that would be something that would be an unfortunate decision if I were to do that. So far I haven't done that, but the toxicity is unpleasant. There were people who assumed that we had made a grave mistake to invite those two women simply because they had posted some injudicious tweets in previous races. Okay, no one's perfect. We all make mistakes. But had they been abused at the Austrian Grand Prix? Yes. Should they therefore have been offered by Formula One a nice day on Sunday? Yes. Are we pleased that we were able to help make that day special for them? Yes. And by the way, Pina, I personally think it's sad to hear you talk about the fact that you have always found yourself very, very welcome in Formula One, rightly so, absolutely rightly so. And I think it's very unfortunate if you should feel that that welcome is becoming compromised by recent changes. I regret that. I think anybody watching or listening to this should regret that. And I think that you, Pina, and every other person, whether they are female, whether they are old, whether they are young, whether they are LGBTQ or plus, whether they are disabled, whatever they are, they should be welcomed, cherished, celebrated, and encouraged to join in with our wonderful sport in whatever way they wish to do so.
Definitely, I agree fully. Like, we should feel home. We should be, because it's the best thing in the world to see those cars, to hear those cars. Even with the V6 engines, I still love the roaring of the cars. And so it's important to keep that safe place for the fans. That's the most important thing, I think, in Formula One nowadays, because this thing is getting a bit accelerated. I feel like from outside, we'll see if it's like how, I don't know. I will be at Belgium Grand Prix and Dutch Grand Prix. We'll see how is the atmosphere up there, but I don't want to hold you too long because it's going to be busy 3 weeks for you. My last question is, how do you feel about Spa-Francorchamps maybe leaving the calendar next season? Because it's very, very obvious, but it's my favorite track, and I'm very excited to see it alive for the first time next weekend. So how do you feel about the calendar placement, and what do you think will happen for Aston Martin in the start of the second part of the season?
The very first Grand Prix I ever went to, personally, attended, was the 1974 British Grand Prix. I was 11 and a half years old, and I was taken by my stepfather to Brands Hatch. I was living in London, as I still live in London, as I've lived in London all my life. And Brands Hatch is about 20 miles southeast of London. And I went to Brands Hatch and I thought it was wonderful. And I fell in love with the sport. And Niki Lauda led the race in a Ferrari. but Jody Scheckter won the race in the Tyrrell. And my childhood hero, Carlos Reutemann, was racing a beautiful white Brabham BT44. And I thought everything was absolutely magical. And included in that magic was Brands Hatch, which is still one of my favorite circuits. Of course, Formula One doesn't race there anymore. Nothing lasts forever. Almost nothing, not even life itself lasts forever. And what can I say? Do I miss Brands Hatch? Yes, I think it was a fantastic circuit. Could Formula One race there now? Probably not, because of the local housing being too close for fast cars, as fast as Formula One, with the runoffs required and the noise regulations and all the rest of it. But actually, I celebrate the fact that Brands Hatch did exist, and we can still watch the Formula One races on YouTube, and the fact that I went there as a young man and through my teenage years and so on. And also, by the way, it still exists, and it still puts on racing all the time. If we lose Spa to Formula One, if we do, everything that I've just said about Brands Hatch would still apply. Spa will still be a successful circuit. It will still be raced on most weekends. It will still have hosted some of the greatest Grand Prix in the history of our beautiful sport. And we'll still be able to watch those things on YouTube. Will it be regrettable? Well, yes, you can regret these things if you like, but nothing lasts forever, not even life itself. And if I think of Spa, I don't just think of recent races. I mean, I don't think of last year's race, because that wasn't very exciting. But I do think of the race 22 years ago, when Mika Häkkinen overtook not only Michael Schumacher's Ferrari, but also Ricardo Zonta's BAR in one beautiful move, having taken Eau Rouge flatter than flat in order to be able to set up that incredibly spine-tinglingly brilliant move, which I must have watched on YouTube 100 times, maybe 1,000. So what can we say about this? Is it important that Formula One continues to conquer new territories and is embraced by, for instance, the United States? Yes, it is important. Is that happening? Yes, it is happening. We have Netflix Drive to Survive, which is spreading the word of what a beautiful sport we have, far and wide and global. And we now have 3 races next year in the United States of America, and who knows if we may have more. Is that to be celebrated? Yes, in my view, it is. Some of the other countries we're going to, yes, I think they're also wonderfully important things we should celebrate. And if we lose Spa, or Spa becomes once every 2 years, or Spa disappears for a while and then comes back, or whatever happens, will it be regrettable? Yes. Will it be the end of the world? No. And Formula One will survive, and our memories of Spa will survive, exactly as my memories and many other people's memories of Brands Hatch in Formula One survive. And by the way, I can go and watch racing at Brands Hatch any summer weekend of the year, and so can people in Spa.
Thank you so much. I hope it won't stay in our memories, but definitely it will stay in our memories. I'm sure of it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your second chance of interview. This was very important, and I think it was very crowded time of the season for my luck. And thank you so much, and hope everyone enjoyed the interview. Hope you subscribe to my channel, and good luck for the rest of the season, Matt.
Thank you so much, Pina. I'm honored to be invited not only once, but twice. It's my privilege, not yours. I think, Pina, you're a great interviewer. I urge people to subscribe to your channel and to watch your videos. The one question I didn't answer, you said, how do you think we're going to go at this race, the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix? I'm not going to make a prediction. I just hope that we get both cars in the points, and that we have a reliable, safe race, and that if it rains, it doesn't rain so hard as that last year, things become so difficult. Yeah. I want proper days, practice, qualifying and race. I very much hope that's what happens, and I hope at the end of Sunday, both our drivers, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, have scored points. I'm not predicting it, I'm hoping for it.
Fingers crossed, let's say fingers crossed, and best for the Aston Martin, especially Sebastian Vettel, because he's leaving end of the season. So I would like to very much see more podiums and more points before he left. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you. Goodbye.